The E-JSD is proud to present a short story by author Seth Underwood. Sit back and enjoy the reading by our AI voices. Check out the E-JSD on Substack. We publish fiction short stories and occasional news items, all delivered to your email inbox, or viewable via the Substack app. The Substack app is now available for download both on the Apple's App Store and Google Play. Smoking Cotton. A Rosella World Story by Seth Underwood. In the future of America, the legalization of recreational use of drugs will become a commonplace source of taxation for states struggling with massive budget shortfalls caused by dwindling federal program funding. The Supreme Court will permit such usage except on federal lands and will permit commerce except for the interstate transportation of federally illegal substances. Drug lords and black marketers will persist, transporting drugs between state markets and acting either as the source of more powerful illegal substances or the backdoor supplier to local shops and merchants evading state revenue taxation, or worse, a state contractor supplying for the state's commercial outlets. The nation will be placed on food rationing to deal with the disruptions in food supplies caused by global warming, and the federal government will be forced to deal with massive civil engineering projects to help protect the nation's capital and other important major coastal cities from flooding. In the middle of the nation, a major volcanic eruption will have occurred, all because of careless fracking. Humanity will have fully harnessed the means to create new species of plants and animals through improved genetic editing devices like CRISPR. The irony of such genetic improvements is that what man had originally intended doesn't always end up as the ultimate use. The genetically modified version of cotton designed to create a pest-proof version of the plant paradoxically ended up creating one of the most popular street drugs of the era. Despite the legalization of drugs, some black marketers have turned it into a deadly addictive substance. Below is a transcript from a social media net show on the subject.
I'm Dr. Daisy Miles talking about Boutcyclidine.
Beginning of recorded material.
This is Popular Street Drugs, a bi-monthly vidzine talk show where we have casual conversations with scientists about current popular street drugs facing America. Pharmazon, the single largest direct deliverer of prescription medications, brings our show to you today. Today's guest is Dr. Daisy Miles, the scientist who was credited with introducing a drug 20 years ago, the refinement of which has led to one of the newest street drugs that is currently responsible for the deaths of hundreds of youths in inner-city areas.
This is Gabrielle Mosley, and I am here with Dr. Daisy Miles, the founder of Boutcyclidine, a PCP analog, which is a novel psychoactive substance. Every year some new variant of PCP hits the street, and Boutcyclidine and its newer cousin Boutcyclidine B are no exception. Boutcyclidine is also known as Nirvana Puff Balls, Cotton Death Trip, Cotton Stiff, and NDE Cotton. This variant of the drug has been around for the last 20 years. But its newer cousin, the beta version, has only recently surfaced in the last 5 to 10 years on the streets. So Dr. Miles, could you tell us something about Boutcyclidine?
I wouldn't say I am the founder. More like the researcher who discovered it. I was studying pharmacokinetics as a grad student when I came across it.
Can you elaborate more on how you discovered Boutcyclidine?
Well, as a grad student, I came across a research paper from India in which some field workers had become paralyzed after inhaling smoke from a cotton field fire. The workers reported having unusual hallucinations where they thought they had traveled to nirvana. I really became fascinated with the subject and turned it into my thesis.
So how long did it take you to discover Boutcyclidine?
That is the funny bit. I discovered the properties rather quickly when I duplicated the basic conditions of what happened in India. Franklin, who was a fellow grad student, was helping me and was my test subject. I honestly thought I had killed him at first. He just sat there, totally paralyzed after he inhaled the fumes. It wasn't until an hour later that he came out of it and told me of the wild trip he had, of floating out of his body, going through the building, and then into space itself. Only to be snapped back down into his body as the drug wore off.
Isn't Franklin your husband?
Yes, that is right. We eventually got married.
So, After your initial test where you paralyzed your future husband, what did you do next?
Well, we ran some blood work on him. Did some other tests. Didn't really find anything out of the norm. I looked at the cotton plant itself, and that is when I discovered that the plant had in it a natural Botox compound.
Botox? The stuff used for migraines and wrinkles.
Yes, that is correct.
What is Botox doing in cotton?
That is what I asked myself. So, I talked to the farmer where I got the plant from, and he gave me the seed manufacturer. I looked up the seed manufacturer in the Department of Agriculture's genome database, and they held a patent for a genetically modified cotton plant. The genetic patent showed it was modified to include Botox as pest control.
Well, that makes sense. But how does Botox become Boutcyclidine?
Now that is the part that took me the longest to figure out. I spent over 2 years trying to crack that nut, and in the meantime, my initial research was spreading quickly around the campus. My fellow students were paralyzing themselves to experience the nirvana-like effects of the cotton puffballs.
Are you telling me that your fellow students were getting high from this as soon as you discovered its effects?
Yup. That was pretty much what happened. You know, there is no way you can keep something like this a secret on a college campus. I would say within a week, or maybe it was 2, people were smoking cotton on the campus.
Weren't you concerned? What did the administration do?
I was too preoccupied with figuring out how the Botox became Boutcyclidine to care about what was taking place on the campus. Besides, no one was dying or having any issues, so no one cared.
What about the paralysis? This wasn't seen as dangerous. I mean, people are just lying stiff for an hour. Couldn't something bad happen?
Well, I guess if you put it that way. But back then, no one really thought anything of it. Most people smoking cotton were doing it in their dorm rooms, so there were fewer risks or dangers. I guess today people will smoke cotton in other places we never thought of. I mean, I have heard of people smoking it in the woods and having some wild animals come up to them. See, that kind of stuff is just plain stupid. I mean, this stuff causes paralysis while you are tripping, so you must make sure you either have a buddy or you are in a safe place.
What about any side effects from its use?
That is just it. In these early days, no one knew the dose levels or what were the side effects. And as far as I could tell from the anecdotal reports I heard from my fellow students, smoking cotton there didn't seem to have any negatives. Even today, there are no known side effects from smoking, including cancer-causing agents. Heck, the stuff leaves no metabolites in the body to trace. It is the perfect drug to get high with.
Isn't it possible to overdose? I mean, all drugs like this typically have some sort of overdose limit?
See, that is the odd thing with Boutcyclidine. You really cannot overdose on the stuff. When the Botox is changed into Boutcyclidine through heating, and when the smoke is inhaled, it paralyzes from the C6 nerves down. Even if there is some smoke in the air, once the paralyzation takes effect, the body will not absorb anymore. The only way you could overdose on Boutcyclidine is if you tried to concentrate the Botox from the cotton.
Wow. I guess it is the perfect drug to get high with.
I would say the original stuff is, but the new street stuff isn't.
Oh, are you talking about Knockout, Wrath, Nitro, Reaper, and Afterburner?
Is that what they are calling it? Go figure the drug lords would take a simple, harmless drug and jack it up. I mean, what I discovered was harmless and still is harmless by pharmacological standards. But the stuff they are making is pure death.
Could you elaborate more?
Sure. A while back, I had to give a deposition before Congress on this entire problem. The Botox in the cotton plant is also in the seeds, which can be found in higher concentrations in the cottonseed oil. But when I studied the cottonseed oil, I noticed the Botox had changed through making the oil into yet another compound of Boutcyclidine. I called it Boutcyclidine B. This stuff was more potent than the original Boutcyclidine, and I did not know what its effects were exactly on people. Before I could conduct trials, reports were coming in from the police and coroners in the Los Angeles area of some odd deaths. When I examined these reports, I realized it was from Boutcyclidine B. Someone was taking cottonseed oil and crystallizing it after mixing in some other drugs like cocaine or heroin. The Boutcyclidine B was surviving remelting because of the other drugs mixed in and then, when injected, was at least 1,000 times more potent. The paralysis was stopping the heart and respiration functions. This stuff was basically crystal death.
I see. What do you think of California's Proposition 648 where they are trying to license the use of cottonseed oil? Do you think regulations like this can help?
Not really. I think the drug lords have figured out how to make a more potent addictive version. No amount of regulation is going to stop them. Governments have tried for years to regulate raw ingredients for certain drugs with little success. I don't think Prop 648 is going to work either. It's just going to drive up the street cost and fuel possible armed robberies to pay for it.
Interesting. Would you say that your discovery was an economic boon to the U.S. cotton industry? I mean, shortly after the discovery, farmers in several states grew cotton for the first time in years. Many states saw a jump in tax revenues associated with cotton drug use.
Really? I wouldn't go there. All I did was discover the drug effects of a genetically altered plant. Look, I cannot help the fact that as a nation, we are in a financial mess. I mean, we knew about global warming for years, and don't get me going on the stupidity of fracking along the New Madrid Fault causing the worst volcanic eruption in God knows how long. Just be thankful that the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the home rule for states on drug enforcement issues, allowing them to reap tax revenues. If my discovery helped the economy recover, that's great. But I can tell you it is not like I am making millions from it. I haven't made a single dime from its discovery despite what some on the social media networks are saying about me.
Okay. Isn't it still illegal to transport drugs between state lines?
Well, yeah, for right now. But who knows? I hear there are some cases making their way up to the Supreme Court on that issue.
Where do you see things going from here?
To be honest, I think this new street drug is going to make things worse for Boutcyclidine use. The feds are already trying to get the states to clamp down harder on its use because of the deaths. Even though there are some interesting innovations happening with goat-ingested variations of Boutcyclidine, where the goats eat the cotton puffballs and either the milk or the waste is used to make Boutcyclidine products, I think further research in this area is going to dry up, and there is a current push by the Agriculture Department to go back to the original cotton genome despite the pest issues. Both China and India have already moved back to the original cotton genome as part of a larger trade negotiation. I think the days are numbered for Boutcyclidine.
Fascinating. Thank you, Dr. Daisy Miles, for your insights on Boutcyclidine.
My pleasure.
End of recording material. Thank you for listening to the E-JSD. This has been a presentation by the Joseph Street Digest, an imprint of AEM Services. All copyrights are owned by their respective owners.
Please like, share, and subscribe.